convicted in the crash that killed a Massachusetts state trooper, was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and not guilty of driving under the influence of drugs. The judge ruled that David Jagunya was reckless and driving out of control. But as Ken MacLeod reports from Worcester, prosecutors couldn't prove he was high on marijuana at the time of the crash.
The defendant was found guilty on some very serious charges, but his acquittal on others will certainly reignite the debate over driving high on marijuana and how police measure that.
I specifically find this was not an accident as defined under the law.
With that simple statement, David Jagunya knew the judge was not buying his defense, that a seizure at the wheel sent his Nissan careening across the Mass Pike in May of 2016, slamming into Thomas Clardy's parked cruiser and killing the veteran trooper. His widow, Risa, and some of his 7 children sat in the front row in a courtroom filled with state police.
And I find that Mr. Jagunya's intentional, wanton, and reckless conduct resulted in the death of Thomas Clardy.
Indeed, the judge found Jagunya guilty of involuntary manslaughter, saying it was his speeding and weaving in the minutes before the crash that were to blame for the trooper's death. But when it came to the prosecution's assertion that Jagunya was impaired by his medical marijuana when he killed Trooper Clardy, the judge offered this.
I find it insufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Jagunya was operating his motor vehicle under the influence of marijuana.
In fact, despite evidence that Jagunya had just come from a pot dispensary and smoked some of what he bought, the judge further opened a legal can of worms by declaring she sees no scientific or medical consensus on what level of THC in the blood even constitutes impairment. The Clardy family left court without comment, but the state's top trooper said there will always be an empty seat at the Clardy's table and a hole in the hearts of the Massachusetts State Police. Despite his recent courtroom rant, Jagunya reacted to the verdict by quietly shaking his head. The Clardy family may be reserving comment for Jagunya's sentencing, which is set for November 21st. He could get 20 years for involuntary manslaughter. In Worcester tonight, Ken MacLeod, WBZ News.